Chromosomes. Little strands of nucleic acids and proteins are the fundamental genetic instructions that tell us who we are at birth. Most people are born with 46 chromosomes, but each year in the United States, about 6,000 people are born with an extra chromosome, making them a person with Down syndrome. If you've ever encountered someone with Down syndrome, you know that they are some of the kindest, most joyful people you will ever meet. They truly have something extra. My name is Lisa Nichols, and I have spent the last 24 years as both the CEO of Technology Partners and as the mother to Allie. Allie has something extra in every sense of the word. I have been blessed to be by her side as she impacts everyone she meets. Through these two important roles as CEO and mother to Allie, I have witnessed countless life lessons that have fundamentally changed the way I look at the world. While you may not have an extra chromosome, every leader has something extra that defines who you are. Join me as I explore the something extra in leaders from all walks of life and discover how that difference in each of them has made a difference in their companies, their families, their communities, and in themselves. If you like this episode today, please go to Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen and leave us a 5-star rating. I'm honored to have Tom Ziglar on the show today. Tom is a speaker and author and the CEO at Ziglar Inc. Well, Tom, I am so incredibly honored. I'm honored to have you on the Something Extra podcast today. I have been a fan of the Ziglar name for a very long time, and I'm just really grateful that you're making the time because I know that you're really busy speaking and writing and running the Ziglar group and all the other many things you do.
Yeah, it's a blessing to be here. And I love the title of your podcast, Something Extra. I mean, that's pretty cool. Back in the day when Dad was speaking for Amway quite a bit, he created an audio program. I think it was about 4 hours, and he called it A Little Bit Extra. So,
oh my goodness, I had no idea. That is so cool. That is very special. I really love the name now. Well, yeah, and you know the precipice behind that. You and I, first of all, I have to do this. I have to give a shout out to our mutual friend, Bob Teedy, because Bob is the one, and Bob has written multiple books himself, and his latest one, Leading with Questions, which I absolutely love. Talking about reading a lot. Tom, you and I are both voracious readers. That one I've got outlined, underlined, highlighted, but I had that with yours too. And we're going to talk about yours, but mutual shout out to Bob for connecting us. I really appreciate him for doing that.
Brother Bob, he's amazing, amazing man.
He really, really is, and has served now in that role for 50 years. Isn't that incredible?
I asked him, I say, Bob, you think you're going to like it?
Do you feel like you found your calling yet, Bob? Oh, I love it. Well, you know what? I was thinking about you this morning as I was thinking about our conversation, and you and I have a lot in common. We really do. I think I'm your elder, but we were at least born kind of in the same decade.
Okay.
We're both in our 50s. I'm late 50s. I think you're more mid 50s, maybe.
I'm 58.
You're 58. Okay, well, I'm 59. So I'm
go.
just a little bit your elder. So we've got that in common. First and foremost, Jesus is the center of both of our lives.
Amen.
And without him, I would be nothing. I could do nothing. And so that's the most, that's the one that stands out to me the most. And then you and I both had parents, amazing, amazing intentional parents. Both of them, yours and mine, are both in heaven with their Lord. Today is a particularly, important day for me, Tom, because my dad passed away 1 year ago today.
Oh, wow.
So I have been thinking about him a lot, but we just had, amazing parents. And I know you feel the same way. I'm so grateful for that. Your dad was Zig Ziglar. And I have to ask you this question. Now, I already know the answer to this, but I want you to answer it. Is Zig really his first name?
Oh, that's such a great trivia question. Of course, his given name was Hillary Hinton Ziegler, and so when you are named Hillary Hinton, you go by Zig. Oh,
That's right. I think he got that nickname in elementary school. So here's something else, and this is why I wanted to ask you the question. Here's something else we have in common. My husband, Greg, his dad's name is Gene Nichols. But Tom, he was in the Army. And so, you know what? He very quickly became Nick.
yeah,
And everyone knows him by, he's passed on now, but Nick Nichols. And the other thing that we have in common, his wife, my mother in law, is a true redhead. And I just remember reading some of your dad's books. Your mom's name is Jean,
right.
but he would always refer her as to the amazing redhead.
Yep.
And
And actually, my mom was a decided redhead.
oh, was she? Okay,
Yeah,
see, there
yeah,
you go. That's another little piece of trivia.
yeah. Meaning one day she just decided.
Yeah.
Yeah. And she told her beautician, she said, if you keep me in the red, I'll keep you in the black.
Oh, I love that. That is fantastic. Well, was she a firecracker? Because Greg's mom, Dixie, she is a spunky thing.
Oh
She's
yeah.
83 years old, but has so much
That's
spunk
awesome.
about her.
Yeah, mom was too. She was
Yeah.
amazing.
Yeah. And then your youngest daughter, our youngest daughter's name is Alexandra. Your
Right?
daughter's name is Alexandra. We call
Yes.
our Alexandra, we call her Allie. But, she's really the precipice for the podcast. And, she's a little girl with Down syndrome, extra 21st chromosome, but we
Right.
all have something extra, right? Maybe later. I love the story that you tell. I think it's in your book, Choose to Win, about when you did for your daughter what your dad did for you, and your dad took you on a lot of his speaking things, and you got to meet amazing people. Well, you did the same thing with Alexandra, and I had to chuckle at the story with her when you took her, I think it was to Australia, maybe, with
Yes.
Howard Partridge.
Yes.
What happened there, Tom? Just tell us that story real quick.
Yeah. So, interestingly enough, I was speaking there about 3 weeks ago again. Steve McKnight, who was the one who invited me over, and that was my first trip over. And of course, I think she was 17, and we got to go on a daddy daughter trip together. So we get there, and it's a conference. It's a real estate investing conference and business owners. And I do the keynote in the morning, and there's like 600 or 700 people there. And then in the afternoon, Howard Partridge, our business partner, was there, and we were doing these 1 hour kind of sessions. And we invited business owners in, and they would ask us questions about how to grow their business, and it could be about anything. And so Alexandra had told me, she said, Dad, I want to go. I want to sit in the room. I want to see what's going on, but don't call any attention to me. Don't make a big deal that I'm there. 17, a little quiet, new country. And so I said, sure. And so we get up to do the first afternoon session, and the people started asking questions. And Howard turned to me and said, Tom, I think we should write these questions on the board. What do you think? Because they had a whiteboard there. And I said, that's a good idea. And before I knew it, he said, Alexandra, can you come up here and write these questions on the board? And my daughter, back row, she stands up. And, first there was shock, and then she put on the ballerina pose and the ballerina smile. And that's the smile where your face is glued into a smile. And nobody knows what you're thinking or feeling, but your toes could be bleeding and your ankle could be broken. But the ballerina thing, she'd been doing that
Mhm.
for 12 years, and she walks down the center of the aisle, and the whole time her eyes are locked on my eyes, and I
The
can,
looks
I,
could have killed.
Yeah, the laser beams are coming off her eyes, and I can feel my face kind of melting, right? She's not happy. She gets up there, she writes a bunch of questions on the board. She does fantastic. She sits down. I don't think anything of it. At the end of the session, she comes to me during the break and she says, "Dad, tell Howard not to ask me again. I want to be here, like I said, but I don't want to be in front of the room. I just want to." I said, "Okay, I'll tell him." Well, she leaves, and during the break, all these business owners who were in the session, they start talking, and before you know it, the session's over and the break's done, and we're starting the next session. And I didn't tell Howard. And just as he starts it off, and he says, "Alexandra, can you come to the front and write on the board?" And I realized what I'd done, and I look up, and Alexandra's got that ballerina pose. She's walking down the middle of the aisle. Her eyes are locked on mine. And this time, nuclear warheads are coming out of her. Right? I mean, like I'm in big trouble. If you've ever had the daughter stare, whoo. And so she gets up. She does a great job. Sits down. We end the session. This time, she comes immediately to me. She puts her hands on either side on my shoulders, taps me in the face. That's what women do sometimes to get the guy's attention.
Yes.
She says, "Look me in the eye, Dad." And I said, "Okay." He goes, "Tell Howard not to ask me up front." Well, she leaves, and I get a bunch of more questions from these business owners. We're talking. And then Howard starts the next session early before I can tell him. And he starts it off. "Alexandra, come to the front and write on the board." We both look at the back row where she'd been sitting, and she was gone. And so then we looked at each other, and she'd moved up, and she was sitting on the end of the second row. She had a big smile on her face. She jumped up and she wrote on the board. And that was the day that my young daughter, kind of quiet, turned into a young woman, because that confidence. We've actually got a picture of her on stage, and so what had happened is the awesome Aussies had come up to her during the breaks and said, "Do you like traveling with your dad? How do you like Australia? Where are you going to go to university? Do you what career are you thinking about? Do you think you might speak one day?" And so the lesson is the people there thought she could do more than she thought she could. And so that confidence that she got lifted up, and that never would have happened
Right.
if she hadn't come. And then Dad had this quote that's pretty famous about this. He said, "Love to a child is spelled Time." And so we were just blessed. She's been a lot of places with me.
Yeah.
And those are the best experiences.
Tom, we did not plan this. You had no idea what I was going to talk to you about. I'm so glad you said that quote, though, because I had that written down as one of the quotes. I told you I've got a whole book of your dad's quotes, and I'm starting to gather yours too. So keep putting those wonderful motivational quotes out there. But I love that story. So maybe the lesson for us, Tom, is should call on people more. Put people on the spot more, right?
Yeah, it's amazing. We've all done more than we thought we could because somebody believed in us. One of my primary things that I do now is leadership. We've created a program around coach leadership, and it's how to lead your people through using a coaching process. And one of the most important things is really sharing that you believe in your people, that you know they can do more than they think they can, and you speak words of truth and hope and life into them, and then you walk beside them. Right? You're not just saying, figure it out, go get it done. You're encouraging, you're believing them, you're giving things maybe a little that make them stretch a little beyond their ability, but you're also equipping them at the same time, and you're there for them when they have a question. And that is an amazing thing, because that's the key that so many people are missing, is they didn't have parents like ours,
Right.
that poured into us, that believed us, that, my dad always told me, he said, "Son, whatever you want to do in life, I'll support it 100%, as long as you are doing it with 100% integrity and 100% commitment." So, 100% effort. So I had that unconditional support from him.
Hmm.
But he told me that, right? And then when I would do something, he would ask me questions to see what my effort and commitment level were. So
I love it. It had to just be, well, both your mom and dad, because I mean, I read something about your mom and something like that. She just loved everyone, benevolent, loving, compassionate person, you know. But it had to have been just really incredible, Tom, growing up with your dad. I mean, can you talk about your dad just a little bit? Because he wasn't always a motivational speaker. That's another really good lesson for all of us, is your dad, obviously stepped into an amazing calling and purpose, but he started out as a salesman, right?
yeah, yeah, yeah. So Dad's story is, golly, it's one of these. Dad used to say that coincidence is God's way of staying anonymous. And when you look at his life and how it started and what he went through and where he ended up, I mean, it's an amazing, amazing situation. He was born in L.A., Lower Alabama. He'd always get a chuckle out of the audience, and then moved to Yazoo City, Mississippi, when he was like 3 or 4 years old. His dad died when he was 5.
Oh,
So
I'm
now he's the 10th of 12 kids, 6 of them too young to work in the Great Depression,
wow.
being raised by a widowed uh, mother,
With 12 kids.
and with 12 kids. And of course, Mississippi may be the poorest state in the union, and he's in a little town. And so that meant that he started work when he was 6 years old. He sold peanuts on the corner.
Mm.
A few years later, started working in a grocery store. And, Dad would say he never did well in school. He was in the part of the class that made the top half possible. World War II comes along. He gets in, gets a little bit of college, doesn't do well there. The war's over. He got in at the very tail end, and then he got married, started his sales career, and for 2.5 years in his sales career, he didn't sell anything. Well, he did. He sold his car. He sold his furniture. Right.
Right. But
And
he
then
didn't
one,
really cookware.
yeah. And then one day he was in a meeting and his hero was there, PC Merrill, who was kind of a legend in the company and somebody he really looked up to and respected. At a break, came to him, put his hands on Dad's shoulder, and said, "Zig, in all my life, I've never seen such a waste." And then he said, "But," and we all know that "but" negates everything that came before it. And he said, "But you could be a champion if you just believed in yourself and went to work on a regular schedule." And so that was the day that Dad decided he was going to figure out what it means to believe in yourself. And that was the day he committed to knocking on the first door every day at 9 a.m. because he was in door-to-door sales selling cookware. Well, that year he finished number 2 out of 7,000 salespeople. And in the previous 2.5 years, he'd never been in the top 5,000. And so what that meant was that he was now the golden guy, right? Everything
Mhm.
he did. So he got recruited. And when you have that level of success, people want you to do training. And so he started developing and training his, sales teams and his people. And then as he grew in that, he realized that it wasn't sales skills and sales techniques that really determined a salesperson's success. It was their belief in self-image, right? It was who they were, because in sales you get rejection all day long. I mean, that's
Right.
part of what it is. And so more and more of his training went that direction. And then people said, "Well, you should come over here and speak." And he saw a speaker and said, "That's what I want to do." And so that's how his speaking career got started. And in the line of sales that he was in, it was presentation selling. So he would do a presentation that was a sales presentation. And he did it so many times, he learned to watch the response of the people listening.
Mhm.
And that is an art and a skill. So as a speaker, You have to do something enough reps to where you have the confidence that you know the material to where you can start to understand the feedback you're getting from people's, body language and smiles and attention. And so
Mhm.
that's what really, and so he started adding humor and stories and all those things into it. And that's kind of how his career got started as a speaker.
Oh, what a great story. Tom, thank you so much for telling that. That is just incredible. I'm sure that's written down somewhere, but if it's
Oh
not,
yeah.
that needs to be because that's just amazing. Well, I know that, faith was very important to him. In fact, you say that one of the things that you treasure the most is your dad's underlined Bible, which is
Yeah.
really precious. I've got both my parents as well. But I know he spoke about 150 times a year. He's authored over 2 dozen books over his life. And I read one stat that said he reached 200 and over 250 million people with his messages. But Tom, I remember when my kids were young reading, like I've read lots of your dad's books, but one of them that I had read was Raising Positive Kids in a Negative World.
Yeah.
And I remember that book so well. And I was thinking about it because we've got a little grandson now. And I'm like, I need to pull that book back out. I think because unfortunately, I think the world has gotten a little bit even more negative, since my kids were little. But here are some famous quotes of your dad. And then I want to get into your books. And what you're doing today with Ziglar Inc. But this is one that I know our readers will recognize. If you aim at nothing, you will hit it every time. That's
Yeah.
one of your dads. You can have everything in life, and this is one that you kind of build your life on too. You can have everything in life you want if you will just help other people get what they want. Love that. I love this one. Cheryl Batchelder is a good friend of mine. I don't know if you know Cheryl, Tom, but Cheryl was the CEO for Popeye's Chicken. And she says this. In fact, I think I knew that this was one of her favorite quotes. I didn't know that it was your dad's, but I think I even had this inscribed for her. But attitude, not aptitude, will determine your altitude. And I
Yep.
think that's really awesome. There are no traffic jams on the extra mile.
Yep.
And I could go on and on and on, but for our listeners out there, look up quotes by Zig Ziglar and Tom Ziglar because Tom's got his own quotes. But you started out in the warehouse at Ziglar in 1987. I think you were stocking tapes, to seminars. You went from there to production to sales, and then you actually became the CEO in 1996. Was that your dad's idea to start you in the warehouse? I'm sure it was, but tell me that story.
Yeah. It's interesting. It's, what had happened is in college, I played college golf and I wanted to be a professional golfer. And so when I graduated from college, I needed a job that would um, pay for my golf habit as I was on that journey.
Yes.
And it needed to have some flexibility. So I could work early or I could work late, and, shipping uh, our orders or doing whatever they needed in the warehouse afforded that. So that's kind of how I landed in there. Plus, it was a good place to start learning the business from top to bottom. But my goal was to be a professional golfer. And the better I got and the more I progressed, the more I understood how good those guys really are. so, so even though I got pretty good, it was nowhere near what the guys on tour did. And I decided to move into sales, and I just fell in love with selling. That's kind of in the blood uh,
Mm-hmm.
in our family. In fact, when I was born February 1st, 1965. And on February 2nd, 1965, in Columbia, South Carolina, in the newspaper, Dad put in a birth announcement, and it announced that John Thomas Ziegler, born on February 1st, 1965, as a born salesperson. So I have a newspaper clipping that I was a born salesperson. And
So it was meant to be. It was
yeah,
meant to be. Your dad spoke it into existence there.
yep.
That's
And
awesome.
what's interesting is that Dad was so proud of being a sales professional, and still to this day, the overall impression of salespeople is negative,
That's right.
right? Uh,
Hmm.
and he had a whole program called Sales: The Proud Profession, and the reason he felt that way is because somebody who's a good salesperson has the ability to convince somebody to do something.
Hmm.
And so then the question is, are they going to do it with integrity to make sure that what is being offered is what that person actually needs? And so
Hmm.
there's a huge moral responsibility on the salesperson.
Absolutely.
And if you have a product or service that solves a need to help someone, then you have a moral obligation to sell it. And so it's a really interesting thing because a lot of people in sales, they don't go all in, they don't go 100%. And instead of being fully convicted and learning their profession like they should, when somebody says no, they give up, even though it's in that prospect's best interest to say yes. And so Dad
Hmm.
never liked to see that happen, because if you got something that can change a life, you should sell it.
Amen. Amen to that. Tom, I grew up in the sales ranks, and our company, Technology Partners, we're a full service IT firm. But the way we do business and the way we treat people is a really good way. And, so I've always believed in what we do. You've got to believe in your product. I could never sell something that I didn't really believe in, nor should anyone else if you don't really believe in it, right? But
Right.
to your point, if it's really going to improve someone's life, then you have an obligation to let them know about it. So
Absolutely. Absolutely. You know, the quote that you mentioned earlier, which was Dad's most famous quote, you can have everything in life you want if you just help enough other people get what they want. That quote is a blueprint for life and for purpose.
mhm.
So let's break it down. You can have everything in life you want. Well, if you dig into that, you got to figure out, what do you want and why do you want it?
Mhm.
Because you can't, with conviction, overcome obstacles along the way unless the why is powerful and you have identified what it is that you want. Then it says, if you help enough other people. So who are the other people you're going to help? Right? Your customers, your prospects, your family, your team members. And then what do they want?
Mhm.
Right? So now if you've got clarity on that, then the only question is how. How are you going to do it? And so when a lot of people get lost, you can just refer back to that simple quote. I believe that we all have a common purpose and we all have unique purposes. And
Yeah, that's good.
our common purpose is to serve our fellow human being. That's why we're here. And we do that by helping them solve problems. Right.
It's
And
really good. Well, hey, you just gave me a great segue.
okay,
Thank
good.
you so much. You just set me up. You just set me up to talk about your book, Choose to Win,
Yes.
because this is you talk about the why. Choose to Win. Here's the subtitle: Transform your life one simple choice at a time. Tom, I was reading your forward and I really got teary eyed in your forward because you said when you sat down to write this book, you're like, who would I want to really write my forward? And you said your mom and dad is the
Right.
people you would choose to write your forward. But then you said, I realized that they already did. And your dad's last spoken words to you were, for my son, who am I very proud and grateful for. And then he had Romans 8:28, which can you quote that?
Yeah.
Quote
All things,
8:28.
yeah. All things work together for good for those called according to his purpose.
Yeah, yeah. So I really got teary eyed,
Yeah.
reading that. But your why in the book is really like a legacy. And I was thinking about your mom and dad, and and I know you've done the same thing with your own family, but you say legacy can either happen to you. We're all going to leave a legacy. Whether we believe we will or not, we're going to all leave a legacy, but is it going to be by chance or design? Intentional design. And your parents certainly were very intentional. And I know you've been that same way with your own family. But you talk a lot about, this idea of legacy. You say it's the biggest why of all is legacy because legacy is eternal. What else would you like to say about legacy?
Yeah, I love Mark Batterson's quote on legacy. He says, an inheritance is what you leave to someone, a legacy is what you leave in someone.
Mm,
And I also say that, so many people they're focused on success. Um, and you have to have very clear definition of what success is because there's a lot of quote unquote successful people in the eyes of the world who are pretty miserable. And so what I say is if success is your goal, legacy doesn't necessarily happen the way you want it to. If legacy is your goal, success is always part of the package, right? And
mhm,
so when we elevate and we think about legacy and legacy is when we teach and transfer the habits, the attitudes, the principles, and the values to those we love that will allow them to make good decisions that ripple through eternity.
mhm.
So legacy and leadership go hand in hand. I do a lot of leadership development and training and coaching, and intentional leadership creates intentional legacy. So and the word there is intentional.
Intentional.
Yeah,
That's so
because
good.
because a great leader replicates leaders, and that's really what a legacy is. It's taking the best of what you know and learned, and instilling it in those in your circle of influence, so that they learn that and implement it. So it becomes generational.
Yeah, that's so good. Well, Tom, I want to talk about now the how, the goals, the attitudes, the habits. You talk a lot about habits, but we do need to take a quick break and we'll be right back with Tom Ziglar on the Something Extra podcast.
Hey there. In a challenging business climate like this, savvy leaders look to technology to find an edge. This can mean the difference between staying ahead of the curve or playing catch up. It's time to collaborate with the highly skilled experts at Technology Partners. Our team of technologists draws upon decades of experience for your project, with each bringing a passion for solving problems and a track record of success. How can we help you overcome your biggest technology challenges? Visit technologypartners.net to book a free consultation with one of our leaders.
Well, welcome back, everyone, to the Something Extra podcast with Tom Ziglar. So, Tom, we were talking about legacy and intentionality, leadership. I mean, legacy, intentionality in our leadership will leave a legacy. That's the why, But let's talk a little bit, let's dig a little bit into the how, because in your book, you talk a lot about the choices we make, habits, goal setting. What, tell us something on like for our listeners, like how do you go about setting effective goals? And I know that you've got your wheel too, and maybe that's a good framework, for our listeners to think about their life and the legacy that they want to leave, because the wheel has many spokes on it, right?
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. So there's in the book Choose to Win, there's an anchor quote. And the anchor quote is this: the fastest way to success is to replace bad habits with good habits. And so when we think about success in life, in the first few chapters is about the why and your purpose and really getting clarity on that. Well, then the how is, how do I get there? And so in the wheel of life, and dad taught this for years, I think the wheel existed, and he took a version of it. But I think in at least the United States, dad's wheel of life, he's the one who made it famous. And there's a lot of
Mm-hmm.
versions out there. And in the wheel, it has 7 areas of life: the mental, the spiritual, the physical, the family, the financial, the personal, and the career. And we've got to have balanced success. I mean, why would you have great financial success and lose your family and your health in the process? It doesn't make any sense. And so we've got to have success in all 7 areas. And so one of the simple ways to look at it is to say, okay, so in my mental life, what are my bad habits that are holding me back? And I remember as I was going through this thought process, I was waking up in the middle of the night with nightmares and I couldn't figure out why. And then I realized I was falling asleep with the news on. So,
Mm-hmm.
well, duh. So my mental input, the last thing I was aware of was bad news. And so that was, causing these things. And so each section of our life, each spoke on the wheel, what are bad habits that are holding us back? So mentally it could be negative self-talk, or it could be listening and reading the wrong material, hanging out with the wrong people. And so those are all bad habits. I mean, if
Mm-hmm.
and dad said this, you are what you are and where you are because of what's gone into your mind, and you can change what you are and you can change where you are by changing what goes into your mind. I took that and created my own Tom Ziglar version because I like food a lot, and I just said what you feed your mind determines your appetite. And so
Mm-hmm.
you look at each area on the wheel and you say, what are the bad habits that are holding me back, and then what's a good habit that I could replace it with? Because just because we get rid of a bad habit doesn't mean we're going to put a good habit in. It's got to be a choice. It's got to be intentional. And so that's kind of the how process. And then you get even more specific by choosing the goals that you want to achieve. Who do you want to become? What are the things that you want to, how do you want to grow? What are the things you want to learn? And you then get very specific goals in that area. And then you start finding out, so what are the habits that will create that?
Yeah.
The- right. And so to me, it's all about the habits that we
Mm-hmm.
create, right? There's another quote. I don't know who said it, but it was this. He said, you cannot determine your future, but you can determine your habits, and your habits will determine your future. And so that's how we pull it all together. And so a goal is different than a dream. A dream's in our head, and it's, it can be inspirational and something we want to go for, but because it's not concrete, because we haven't written it down, broke it down, and understand how to make it happen, it usually just stays a dream. So we take our dreams and we turn them into goals. And then in the book, we teach the 7-step goal setting process, which makes it doable. Dad always talked about putting the cookies on the bottom shelf so everybody can get them. Um, Here's an interesting thing about goal setting is if you look at people in general, only 20% of people are motivated. About 80% are problem solving motivated.
Interesting.
But the interesting thing is that the 7-step goal setting system that we teach, you can change the name and it's the exact same 7 steps, and you change the name to the 7-step problem solving system. And so let's use a weight goal. My goal might be to weigh 180 pounds, right? Or if I stated it as a problem, my problem is I weigh 10 pounds too much,
Yeah.
right? But it's the same thing. And then I write the second step, which is what are the benefits from reaching this goal? And you write all those down.
Mm-hmm.
If you said, well, what are the benefits from solving this problem of weighing 10 pounds too much? Right. It's the same
Same
thing,
thing.
right?
Right.
What are the major obstacles and the barriers I have to overcome to achieve this goal? Write it down. What are the major obstacles and barriers to overcome to solve this problem? It's this. It's so you can go through, I won't go through all 7 steps, but that's what happens. And so a lot of people who are natural problem solvers, they feel almost embarrassed they're not motivated by goals. And so you're a problem solver, embrace that and just think of the problems that you want to solve that are a little bit more aspirational about becoming my problem is I'm not the person I want to be next year, right?
Yeah.
So what do I have to do to become that person?
Mm-hmm.
We've all got that problem. I hope I'm not the same person a year from now that I am today, right?
You just reminded me, Tom, your dad had another quote, and it's you don't have to be good to start, but you have to start to be good.
Right.
And I love that because, it's just starting, right? I mean, you don't like the person that you are today. You want to be a different person next year. You got to start, right? And yeah, oh my goodness, such good stuff. Well, I'm just encouraging our listeners, get the book. Get the book, and you're going to want to get his latest one too. But Choose to Win. On page 177, it starts, and you say attitude times effort times skill equals performance. And you've got like a whole list of attitude habits, effort habits. I mean, this is a very practical guide, I believe, Tom, for winning, for that formula, that recipe, if you will. But let's talk about 10 leadership virtues for disruptive times. Because this is your latest book. I think this was released in 2021.
December 21. Yep.
And we all know how disruptive the last few years have been, right? It's crazy. Ken Blanchard, I think, wrote your forward, and I was so grateful to have him on the show last year.
How awesome is that?
Tom,
He's
what an
amazing.
amazing person, right? I think he's like mid 80s or something
Yeah.
like that. And he's like, Lisa, he said, a lot of people say, oh, my best years are behind me. He said, but the best is yet to come, and he's still living life with gusto. I was so inspired. I'm so inspired by him. But he wrote your forward, which was really, really special. But, here's one of the things that really stood out to me. You said that during the pandemic, people did have the time to, things were canceled. There were no youth activities, there was no soccer games to go to. There were no, in our case, galas and charity events and things like that to go to. People really started thinking what is really important in life. And you said like the number one thing on the list for people became quality of life.
Yep. 100%. Dad had a quote that he was teaching it. I remember first hearing it in the 70s. He said, if standard of living is your goal, quality of life almost never goes up. But if quality of life is your goal, your standard
Mm-hmm.
of living almost always goes up. And so the book was interesting because I was starting to work on a manuscript at the end of 2019. And because Thomas Nelson, the publisher, wanted it turned in by summer of 2020, so that it takes like a year to publish in that in a big publishing group. And then the pandemic hit, and they postponed it for another 6 or 8 or a year actually before they wanted the manuscript because the whole industry shut down. And so I said, well, that's this new book. It needs to be about disruption, right? About all the changes.
Mm-hmm.
So really now for 3.5 years, all I've done is study how the world has changed from that huge disruption the pandemic caused. And the first big one was people were losing family and friends, and young people for the first time said, wait a second, people die, right? And
Mm-hmm.
if and that's a collective thing. And so then the second follow up was, does what I do matter? Is my life, is this the way I want to spend my life? Was I intentional about where I'm going? And then we heard the Great Resignation, and the problem with that is that people knew that where they were wasn't the right place, but they weren't sure where they were supposed to go. And
Mm-hmm.
so it's never good to to leave because you're running away from something, unless it's toxic or dangerous, right? That's a different thing. It's
Yes.
always better to be running to something. And so people's core values shifted. And they put things like family relationships and health and, all those quality of life things. They became the primary driver. And then
Hmm.
we saw remote work happen, and people are like, wait a second, why do we work the way we do? What if there's a different way? And of course, everybody's different in their job role, and there's not a one size fits all type solution. But a lot of people started creating the life they always wanted, and their productivity and performance went up.
Hmm.
And
Right.
go figure. If you're in better health, you've got more rest, you're spending more time with the people you love, your brain's probably going to operate better, right? That's our superpower. And so then the book goes into, and this is what I believe, um, disruption is only going to increase in intensity and frequency.
Oh, no doubt. I
It's
believe that too, Tom.
so, and and we talked a little bit about it, but the 5 years from now, when we look at how artificial intelligence and technology has changed the way we do life, we're not even going to remember the pandemic as a big change. It's going to be so much bigger. And so one of the things that I'm just passionate about is helping people to create the mindset to embrace this disruption, because I think we're on the verge of these amazing opportunities to live the life we've always wanted, to get more done, to have more quality of life, and more quality of life, and a higher standard of living, all at the same time.
Hmm.
But it's only going to be if we embrace what's going on and decide that we're learners and growers, and not stuck in the way it always was. Because that's where people get in trouble, is they say, why do I have to do that? Why do I have to change? I like the way it was. I'm fearful of this new thing, but I think it's just going to be better.
Yeah. I love that. And, we're a technology company. And Tom, I will tell you the thing that gets people in trouble the most is adoption.
Yep.
Adoption of new technology, because we see it all the time. Companies will spend billions of dollars sometimes with systems, and and then the adoption rate is not there. Um, I was just last week. I was in Boston at the National CIO Awards, and one of the things that came out of there was the top three things that are top of mind for CIOs, chief information officers, across. There were 265 CIOs there,
Wow.
but top three things: people, culture, generative AI. Those were the top three things. The people, engaging the talent, the culture of the organization, because you got to get the culture right to attract the right people. So yeah, I could not agree with you more. I mean, we're going to just continue to see, we're going to continue to see change.
Yep.
So it's a mindset thing to embrace that change. And you know th- there's there's improvements to be had for sure. I mean, we see technology in healthcare, and how the technological advances are improving the outcome of the patient's experience. So anyway, you've just got so much here. I'm just really hoping that our listeners will get the book. 10 virtues build a bridge between the pain and the vision. You said that you got to help your people see the future. Help your people see the future, and hopefully then they'll be more apt to want to adopt to the change, right?
Yep.
Yeah, there's just so much good stuff here. You ascribe to a lot of, different assessments. I think you yourself, you were trained by Robert Rohn on DISC.
Right.
you know I'm a big proponent of those as well. If you are there and you're trying to figure out, where you're going and your purpose and the person that you want to be, make sure you're doing those assessments to get your current state What is the current state, and then identify those gaps, right? And where you want to go. But, this is all so good. Is there anything else? I mean, I think your first virtue was kindness.
Yeah.
We
That
need a little bit more of that, Tom.
I know. There's just a couple of principles that I love. Kindness that's like the superpower virtue. If it amplifies every other virtue. If people who have different opinions, they're on the different side. If they just sit down with kindness, how much progress would we make? One of the things that I learned from Rabbi Daniel Lapin, who's kind of a friend and a mentor, he talked about how in Jewish tradition, different rabbis from different schools of theology, they would come to the table and they would argue like crazy. But then they would break for lunch and their families would do life together. They would take care of each other's kids. They were best friends. And the reason is they weren't sitting down at the table to win the argument. They were sitting down to discover the truth. And we've polarized our country and our world so much that it's not about discovering the truth anymore.
Mm-hmm.
It's about winning the argument. And so then kindness goes out the door, respect goes out the door, all humility goes out the door, all the virtues that we talk about.
Mm-hmm.
But in embracing the future, think about this. There's in your business, if technology comes in and AI comes in and, all of a sudden 50% of your time is now turned over because AI can do it instantly, right? If you're arrogant, you're going to be like, well, I like the way I always did it, right? And you're going to be resistant to adopting. If you're humble, humility says, always ask this question: well, what's best for the mission?
Mm-hmm.
Well, what's best for the mission is, how can I leverage this new technology to do what's really important and what AI can never do? And that's build strong relationships, like literally old fashioned relationships.
That's beautiful.
So I get excited thinking of all the things that AI is going to do for me, all the data it's going to find for me, so I can use that to serve the people God puts in front of me even more. Now I can be better equipped to build real relationships and have far more relationships than in the past, because I'm not spending all that time trying to figure out what do I do next.
Yeah. I love it. I love it. Well, Tom, I need to come have you speak at some CIO summits.
There you go.
We'll work on that, okay?
Yeah. I
Um,
I only go where I'm invited, just so you know.
well, we're going to work on it. Well,
Okay.
listen, Tom, I so appreciate your time, but I have to ask you, this is called something extra. What do you believe is the something extra? I'll give you a few if you've got a few in there that every leader needs.
Yeah. You need awareness of your blind spot. That's something extra. And somebody asked me one time, they said, what was Zig Ziglar's secret to his that made him Zig Ziglar? What was the one thing that he did? And so this is the something extra that changes everything. So every day for 5 decades, he invested the first 3 hours of the day learning something new, reading God's word, reading the experts. And his motive was to learn that, internalize it, simplify it, and then share it for someone else's benefit. And so my challenge is this: what if you just learn a little something extra every day, took 10 minutes in the morning, 5 minutes, and your motive was to share it to somebody in your family, somebody you work with, somebody you lead, and it was for their benefit? If you did that every day, for that little something extra every day for a year, how different of a human being would you be at the end of the year?
What
So
kind
that,
of legacy would
yeah,
you leave, Tom?
Yeah.
What kind of legacy would you build by doing that?
Yeah.
Well, hey, listen, another thing that we have in common, and I'm really stretching here, is you've written lots of books. I aspire to write books. So I might collaborate with you on a something extra book. So I love what you just said there.
Awesome.
That's beautiful. Well, listen, thank you so much. Thank you so much for being with me today. And I just know that this is going to help our listeners, and I can't wait for them to hear this episode. So enjoy the rest of your day, my friend.
All right. Thank you so much. Be blessed.
Thank you for listening to today's show. Something Extra with Lisa Nichols is a Technology Partners production. Copyright Technology Partners, Inc., 2019. For show notes or to reach Lisa, visit tpi.co/podcast. Don't forget to leave a review on Apple Podcasts, Google Play, or wherever you listen.